Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and this is the 2017 Tiny House Summit. Guest today is Becky Elder. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
So, Becky, you're with Pikes Peak Permaculture. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, gosh, in a nutshell, I was a lifelong environmental activist from Earth First to Ancient Forest Rescue and Sinapu for the wolves. Virtually everything about the planet kind of grew up that way because I grew up in the prairie wilderness. And I came across permaculture in 2002, which as an activist, it was all stop this, no on that, you're the bad guys, this, that. And permaculture came along, and it's actually a science of solutions of how we can live on this planet and not take it down with us. And it was just, for me, it was a complete life change since 2002. I was asked to come back and teach the following year. So I taught at the Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute for 6 years, and then decided I really needed to bring it to my own home grounds in the Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak region, very conservative region. And so this was what permaculture would say an edge. It's a place where there's all these different ways of looking at things as far as the people scope goes. And so it's rich. It was rich, but it was also ripe with opportunity to bring this, this science-based designing to my community.
So what does it actually mean in practice? What is permaculture as a practice?
Permaculture is a designing system. It reconciles our human communities with the ecological needs of a living planet. We're on a living planet. It's a process of designing using nature's tools and the way that nature does things to create our human ecosystem so that we are not overlapping and laying on top of natural systems. We're segueing and integrating in with them so that we're within nature rather than sitting on top of her.
So I'm only asking these questions because I know I've been here before, but someone will say, I still don't understand. What's an example of permaculture? Let's use the garden example. So a typical garden versus permaculture garden.
Oh, well, first off, permaculture is huge. It's a designing system you can use to design anything. So we're starting with the garden. Most people, and let's just say we're growing food, most people go out and they, decide where they're going to do it. They build a square raised bed. They put in little rows for all their little plants, and everything's all organized and maybe even separated. The garden's over here, the compost is over here, the water source is back here, and the farm stand is 2 miles away. Whatever it is, everything is all spread out. Permaculture tries to bring everything together. And so if you look at nature, the trees don't line up in a row. The plants don't grow here of one species and then over here of another species and over here of another species. So a permaculture garden would first be looking at the soil, would be enriched and enhanced soil, which is something that everybody learns in permaculture, is how to build soil. Where I live in Colorado Springs on the Front Range, we don't really have great soil. So, learning how to build and add and enhance your own soil is a real tool that we all use. So you deal with the soil, so you make good, water retentive, fertile soil. You don't necessarily plant your plants in rows, because rows actually are for wheels and you lose 50% of the space for growing. But you might mix them up a little bit. You certainly would grow perennials and annuals. Permaculture, it does a lot of its food work with perennials, because with annuals, think about it, every year you have to plant, every year you have to plant, every year you have to plant. So this is all your energy and your resource and your time to get a yield. And it's a great yield. We all love tomatoes. But permaculture puts a lot of weight on fruit trees and berry bushes and growing perennials like asparagus, rhubarb, horseradish, which I think is really great North American medicine. We don't need melaleuca. We have horseradish. So you have this base, and there's a whole lot of perennial food plants that we tend to ignore. In fact, some of them, we even call them weeds. but they're perennials. They don't need anything from us to grow. Once you get them in and going, they grow without us having to go out there every year and jumpstart them again and jumpstart them again and jumpstart them again. The other aspect of gardening with permaculture is that every plant does something. It's not just that we're growing tomatoes. Tomatoes have needs. Tomatoes have products or impacts that they bring. Maybe it's shade, you know. So every plant that you plant does something. There's nitrogen fixing plants, for instance, that feed all the plants around it. There's dynamic accumulator plants, which are, I really like to talk about burdock root because it's technically a weed called cocklebur where I grew up. It's an edible, it's a really powerful edible plant. It's a beautiful plant, and it's a dynamic accumulator. So it pounds down into the soil, this big fat root, and it mines the minerals from beneath the surface and brings it up into its leaves. And then in the fall, it deposits those leaves on the surface and it moves nutrients and minerals through the soil. Like phosphorus doesn't travel through the soil. That's why you have to put that little dust in when you plant bulbs, because there's no phosphorus down there, but the burdock root can move it. So, I mean, I could talk the whole hour just on this, Steve. And so, does that kind of give you an idea? And you know, everywhere is a garden. It's not like you have a garden space. It's like you might have a garden space where you're growing your tomatoes and all, but perhaps you have fruit trees and you're blocking out your neighbor's dog run with hops plants. I mean, you put everything to use. Everything does as many different functions as possible. It breaks the wind, it provides food, it's a pollinator, it's beautiful, it shades for you, or you can harvest the wood, or you can feed animals with it. There's all these multiple functions that you try and integrate everything together so it works like nature. No one has to go out and mess with nature. It already knows what it's doing.
So I want to help us build this tie between permaculture and tiny houses or small scale living. So one of the things I hear you saying is that the way we envision agriculture is largely kind of in a specialized factory model. And you could make the argument that extends to a lot of ways of living that tiny houses and small scale living kind of push against. And the other is scale, right? What you're describing is, at least as I make a picture in my mind as you're talking, is I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't have to be huge. This can be quite small.
Absolutely. And not everybody has to grow food. People go, oh, you just want me to be a farmer. And that's not really true. And our culture is completely dependent at this point on industrialized agriculture, which does not have a future. It's totally dependent on fossil fuels. It's toxic. It does produce food, but the idea that we need big, huge monocropping industry to feed the world is really not true. They've disproven that. Just talk to Vandana Shiva. And so the small farmer, the small farm, and even the tiny house with just your backyard garden is all playing into this whole vision of we are our culture. We don't have to go somewhere else to have someone else provide for us. We're going to provide our own. You know, permaculture, in fact, started with Bill Mollison in the 70s, the father of permaculture, by looking at what agriculture was doing to his homelands. And so he was looking for the concept of permanent agriculture, because it was the agriculture that he saw and the harvest of the natural world that he saw that was bringing down his environment in Tasmania. And so they went with that for a while. Permanent agriculture, permaculture, permanent agriculture. But after a while, they realized that it was connected to everything. You know, the agriculture is just one element of the whole human ecosystem in which we live. And so I don't know if I'm confusing you further or if I'm actually making the point, but so they changed the permanent agriculture to permanent culture. And now there's a saying in the permaculture movement that, you know, the urban permaculture is going to change the movement even more. And I think the tiny house is changing right along with permaculture, it's almost step by step. We need tiny houses. We have a very friendly cat. We have an overpopulated planet. We're going to have climate refugees. We're already having refugees for a variety of reasons. We can't give everybody this big predetermined size. I like the idea of which one of these custom houses, which one of these 7 custom designs do you want for your house? We don't need big houses. They don't make us happier. Our stuff does not make us happier. The tiny house, actually, a little further down here, we can talk about, I actually have notes for all those questions, but tiny house is right in step with permaculture and permaculture design, because it's based on reality and need and the understanding that our houses and our culture is not really making us happy. A lot of the things in our culture is actually making us sick. And so, we need each other, I think. I would love to have a tiny house myself. I live in a very small house. I apologize for the clutter behind me, but that's because it's a very small house. I'm looking here for my, how they work together. So permaculture raises awareness of limited resources. And we have this disease called consumerism. So, the tiny houses address that directly. You cannot have a bunch of stuff in a tiny house. You have to live disciplined. You have to reduce your footprint and really come to have just the things that you need and want. Not necessarily, not that you want, absolutely need. And then you have to wrestle with your wants, because we have a culture that always says you need more, you need this, you need that, you need this, you need that. But that's really just an aspect of our culture of moving the economy around and around and around in actually I would say a toxic pattern. Along the lines of Annie Leonard and the story of stuff. If you don't know the story of stuff, you can Google it, and it's a 20-minute click with Annie Leonard. She's brilliant, and you'll see how your tiny houses fit right in. Tiny houses are beautiful accommodations. I've seen them all. And they acknowledge the lack of resources that we have to give everybody a house. For people to really feel happy, they need a place of their own. This is a pattern. People are not happy, they're in distress, they're sick if they don't have their own space. Tiny houses can help alleviate that. We have an incredible homeless problem. Tiny houses can alleviate that. Well, let me look at more of this. Permaculture.
I could jump in.
Okay.
I was just rereading Thoreau, right? So this is not entirely new, right? There are these cycles that we go through culturally where the institutional imperative becomes so heavy that people say, I don't know how to grow my own food. I don't know how to build my own shelter. I'm so dependent on institutional organizations for me to move forward. I want to declare some independence. And it feels like both movements tie together that way.
They do. They absolutely do. Permaculture has this these ethics of care for the earth, care for the people, and share the abundance. And tiny houses tag right into that. Caring for the earth, reducing the footprint, reducing the resources needed, reducing the energy use, all that stuff is caring for the earth. Millennials, I have millennials, in the neighborhood and in my family. My own daughter doesn't have a car. She doesn't want debt. She lives in Australia. She just wants more time. She wants a quality life. She doesn't want to be a debt slave, if I may say. And tiny houses are providing this new avenue for people to consider. One of the things that we don't have is unlimited amount of land for everybody. So if you just consider, I'm a councilwoman in Manitou, and I would love to bring tiny houses into Manitou Springs. We have a trailer court, which is, it's out in the urban renewal area. And I'm looking at that going, if we just replaced every one of those trailers with a tiny house, that whole courtyard would morph into something different. There's more room for children to play, more room for trees, more room for gardens. This is caring for people. So let's see. And then there's the third ethic is sharing the abundance and reinvesting the surplus. And so, the limited resources, reducing our needs. This is all one way of sharing the abundance, is to deal with our own consumerism. We know that our culture consumes more than our fair share of natural resources on the planet. So, you know, I think tiny houses is helping people break out of this and see that they can actually live their lives in a different way. You know, I mean, I don't have a TV. Maybe you don't either. I have a computer. So if I want to watch something, I can use it on my computer. Wow, that is breaking a long cycle of you've got to have a TV, you've got to have cable. So tiny houses is getting people there. Go ahead.
We talk about this as though it's a young people's movement, but I keep mentioning in the interviews, the majority of people signing up for the summit are middle-aged.
That's because we're all wrung out and tired. We've lived it. But another thing about it is it's like an economic freedom. You know, in my 60s, I have a mortgage. I will do good if I live to pay the last payment on my mortgage, which I don't intend to do. I intend to maybe drop out and become more of an activist. But, and tiny houses would be a part of that, actually, because I could theoretically park a tiny house in my mother's driveway and have extended family with her, caring for the people, caring for the earth, and break away from my mortgage. Oh my gosh, mortgages are so not sustainable. And you think about how much you have to work to maintain a mortgage and how much you wouldn't have to work if you didn't have one. I mean, people are raised, born into this culture, and you think it's all about work, 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 work. Well, you know, I'm kind of thinking otherwise. I think it's all about living. And I think we're living in a culture that wants us to believe that we have to work, 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 work. And I think less is more. Less work is more life. Less house is more life. Tiny house is a superb way to go. And you can pay off the tiny house in a shorter period of time, record time. No more 30 years of, oh my gosh, my kids are going to pay off my mortgage. I think that's awesome. And I think it's catching on like wildfire, don't you?
I do. I mean, it's part of the reason we're doing the summit. So if somebody wants to grow their own food, can they actually produce a significant portion of what they consume?
Well, that would depend, Stephen, because you know it's not a one size fits all. The permaculture design, you can design your house, you can design your garden, you can design your business, you can design your tiny house community. You can apply it to anything to design. But every design is different. You can't go, oh, this is the tiny house design, I'm going to just start punching this out like clockwork. That's the industrialized economy thinking. Actually, permaculture is, if you don't grow food, and maybe you don't even like food, maybe you don't like worms, whatever it is, you don't have to grow food. But you still have to acknowledge your food is coming from an ethical source, that it's actually good for you. Surprise, we have a lot of food out there that is technically a non-food product. So you support someone else who is growing food. You can do a community-supported agriculture. There is nothing wrong with that. I do that. I don't grow all my own food. I'm too busy. But I support my local farmers. And that is totally in line with a sustainable, ethical life. So you don't have to grow your own food. But if you can actually, we can revamp entire economies by going in with the food movement, local food, slow food, and healthy food, and small farms, farmers markets. One of the things that industrial agriculture brought to us was mechanized food production, so they don't need people. Before that, there was all kinds of people involved in growing our food. And, you know, actually, I've been a gardener all my life. It's a wonderful life. I love being outside. I love growing plants. I love talking to the trees and having the trees talk back, so to speak. And so you could actually reboot the entire economy. Now, this is really a short go on this. There's a lot more to this. But just by introducing local food, getting those jobs out there, and they've done this in Detroit. This is a perfect example of Detroit. Totally went through a collapse. Now they have a lot of urban farming going on, and actually people who were homeless are now working at the farms. Not only that, they're eating better food. What a wonderful earth care, people care, fair share aspect that is. You know, you got to love that. Sometimes I think about moving to Detroit, but I love the mountains, so I can't go. But Detroit's the new land of opportunity, because they are totally restarting over. And it's a beautiful place. They actually have water, which we don't always have here. So, you know, permaculture and tiny houses are changing your life in a positive way and can actually help us design our way out of this mess that we find ourselves in. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel really strung up in this web of do, gotta have money, money, money. And it's not necessarily the avenue to happiness. I think we find our happiness in a human scale life, whether that's growing our own food or not, but having our own autonomy, having good neighbors, having all these things that we, you know, and the homesteading movement is embracing. I mean, there's lots of people turning to this. So.
Yeah, it sure feels like these topics go together. Tiny houses, minimalism, conscious living, homesteading, permaculture, and the themes are very similar, right? Agency, independence, balanced living. It really feels like they're part of a bigger story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Human scale. I love the concept of human scale. Just, you know, if you can do things on a human scale, you can do it all yourself. You don't necessarily need to bring in a lot of other stuff. You can, you know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of the stuff that we do with all of the heavy equipment and the fossil fuels is stuff that we really, do we really need all that? Do we really need all that? So, you know, permaculture as a designing system has principles. We have the ethics upon which we stand. And if you're going to design something, nature has these principles, and there's 12 base ones, but there's way more than that. The more of these principles that you bring in to your design, the more sustainable, the more like nature it is. And so I took some time to kind of think about tiny house with the principles, and I don't want to do them all, but you know, the first principle, first and foremost principle that you are always engaging is observation, observing and interacting with your environment, with your design project. And there's just, you know, that is something that is pretty self-explanatory. We have a culture that's like fast now. Permaculture would say slow down, step back. If you buy a piece of property, don't do anything until you actually have more of a feel for the land. That might take you a year. It might take you 2 years. What do you know about that land? Can you let that land speak to you? You know, where's the wind come from? Where's the sun going? Where's the shade? Is there any water? Is it good water? What are the neighbors doing that might affect you? Do you like your neighbors? I mean, all these things that would come into an assessment of what you have before you even start to design. And I think Tiny House did that very well, just in the designs that I've seen, because it's not always easy living in a small space, especially at first. But I think the ones that I've seen have just been beautifully put together. The second principle is catch and store energy. I mean, tiny houses do that, you know, very easily. And so, you know, just by being smaller, they automatically reduce their footprint. One of the things that I would say to the tiny house community is to try not to use synthetics, plastics, anything that isn't from a natural source as much as possible, because we're running out of those things. And the concept being, if you have a tiny house and there's a lot of wood in it, perhaps you should be growing some timber for lumber. So in 100 years, when you're replacing things, you actually have the wood on your property. That is a far-reaching thought. You know, it's like, wow, you mean I might not have the Home Depot to go to in 100 years? You might not. But think of what your grandchildren would go, wow, you know, Grandpa was really on it when he planted these oak trees, because now we need some awesome wood, and we've got some awesome wood. And, you know, that's capturing and storing energy also involves anything that goes on the property. You can capture and store the water. One capture that we can all do, and it's the most powerful one we can do, and one of the most easiest ones, is to grow food. Even if you just grow a little basil plant on your back stoop. That is like one way of capturing and storing the sun's energy, which is what we eat. So that's the second one. The third one, and I'm going over these briefly because I just wanted to give you guys an idea. I have lots of notes here. The third one is obtain a yield. And the obtain a yield is both for the here and now and also for the future. So, you know, you obtain a yield, you put in your little annual garden and you use that to fix the soil so you can then plant perennials, and maybe you move that around to fix your soil as you're moving through. So you're planning for the future and you're feeding yourself now. Obtain a yield, the rain comes. I'm in Colorado, water is a big issue. And so the rain comes. Is that water, where's that water going? Are you capturing it? Are you putting it to use? Can you capture it in a barrel and wash your hair with it? Your grandmother used to wash her clothes with it, and then put that water on the garden. You know, that's three different uses out of it. And then if you eat anything out of that garden, that's 4. And, you know, what if you had a rain barrel and you just put a few goldfish in it and use that to water the garden? All of a sudden you have, that's called aquaponics without electricity. You don't need electricity to do a lot of this stuff that people tell you do. So, you know, obtaining a yield is ties in with succession as well. One of the things about food is that, you know, trees take a long time to grow. So if you planted all trees and didn't plant the annuals, you wouldn't have anything to eat for 10, 15 years, depending on where you are. So you want to step into the middle of that and mix it up and plant a really good diversity of all these things. And it's not about planting either. It's about obtaining a yield. As I'm going to plant a fruit tree that's also going to reduce the energy in my tiny house. So you can see how these things kind of net together. There's apply self-regulation and accepting feedback. I think that's just, you know, a given for tiny houses. Use and value renewable resources. Create no waste. This is a good one. It's one of my favorites. It has multiple payoffs, and we also have multiple issues. When my kids were little, I said, look, if you want to make sure you have a good job, if that's what you want, go into waste because we're so good at waste. So, but in nature, there is no waste. There's nothing that goes to waste. Nature has these looped systems, which permaculture is all about, looping things back in together, capturing the waste stream, capturing that output and using it over here. Or maybe as simple as moving something from one place to the other to make a harvest. So, you know, pollution is just wasted materials that we're not capturing. And if there's something that is pollution, like plutonium, that we have no end solution for, we should not be producing. That's, you know, that's just the common sense of permaculture. We don't need bad byproducts and horrible accidents. So, you know, permaculture wants to connect all the inputs and outputs of waste. Right now, for instance, there's all kinds of recycling and waste going on. If you wanted to put up rain barrels, you could probably get those barrels for free. If you wanted to do a dry composting toilet, you can get all those things for free. You can get an old toilet seat. You can get an old bucket. There's so much of this that's actually going to waste. And this is a bell curve. At some point, people are all going to be harvesting all that stuff to put to use. And it's going to become a limited resource, which is a good thing for the planet. But right now, I would say, look at what you're throwing away and look what other people are throwing away, and can you put that to use? I mean, we've had people just give you a greenhouse. Hey, if I wasn't there to receive it, it might have been in the landfill. So, you know, we have to connect these inputs and needs that we have with the outputs and wastes that we have and bring them back into the system. I hope this is clear. I mean, it's such a huge subject, but I see tiny houses doing that. And one of the things that I am, as a councilwoman, trying to work out with the tiny house is, you know, the city here, the municipality says, oh yeah, every tiny house is a new hookup to the utilities and a new hookup to the sewer and a new hookup to the water. Do we really need that? Most people say yes now because they were born into this system. But people of permaculture and people on the edge and people of the homesteading are kind of going, you know, maybe I do want a dry toilet. Maybe I want to improve my soil. There's a name for that product, and it's called night soil. It's extremely productive, but we have been raised with the ick factor, and, you know, people don't want to look at that. But Create No Waste would say we should look at that. And I don't know if you know this, Steve, and this is an old figure, it's probably more than that. Every day in the United States of America, we flush over 6 billion gallons of drinking water. Now, I don't know about you, but where I'm at, we don't have a water source. We have very limited water source, and most of the water source in my region comes from the Pacific drainage, even though we're in the Atlantic drainage. They just bring that water under the mountains, and we have all the water we want. We can have bluegrass lawns. We can wash our cars. You know, I mean, that's crazy to me, to take a resource as precious as water, which we cannot live without, and use it that way just to be dainty, not to mention throwing the whole resource away. So, you know, there's more to that. Each one of these things that I talk about is a seminar topic. We could do a whole seminar on just creating no waste. And, you know, the whole concept of planned obsolescence, of like, go out and buy something and it's done in 6 months because it was planned that way. So you have to go out and buy another one. You know, that just galls me.
I think this is going to really appeal to people in the tiny house movement because of the similar themes. So if somebody wants to learn more about permaculture, where do they go? What do they do?
Well, I would say, I mean, they could certainly connect with me, but I'm in my region. I do consulting and I do programs and such in my region. But I would say, look for permaculture in your own neighborhood. If you're in Florida, I don't have much to give you. I don't know anything about growing in a nice, easy environment like that. I don't know much about bugs because we don't have bugs. We have a few. But, you know, it's, you know, find the permaculture in your area. The permaculture in Hawaii, Colorado, Florida, New York, it's all the same permaculture that you're learning, the same ethics, the same principles, how to put them together, how to work with people. Every course is about working with people, because permaculture says, you know, our biggest challenge in this world are people and how to work with people. People don't know how to work with each other. I mean, we can look at what's going on right now in our country on the political scheme of things, and it's just incredibly upsetting and incredibly disjointed and incredibly just a push and pull. And that's just showing us the problem of dealing with people, because people, oh, well, I'm not going to say that. People are a challenge. So the permaculture that you learn is the same, but how you apply that permaculture in your neck of the woods is going to be different. Florida has different soil than Colorado does. Florida has a whole different scape of plants than Colorado does. Different pests, different issues. And so, yeah, I could go to Florida and I could talk to somebody about permaculture and we could work it out, but it would be much easier to go to the permaculturists in your area and go, oh yeah, this is the plants you use, and you know, this is how you do the soil, because they would already know, because that's their area. And so, yeah. You're right. I think you know, the tiny house people and permaculture can actually work together and are working together, along with regenerative design and you know, the homesteading movement. We are working on changing this world from what it is into something better. That's what I see. Did you want me to go through the rest of the principles, or should we just leave it at that? I mean,
no, let's have you go through the rest of the principles, and
okay.
then introduce a little bit of a deeper philosophical question, right? So there's a temptation to see history as always forward progress, and the alternative view is that we cycle, and oftentimes cycle generationally, right? So the focus on balance and self-sufficiency and conscious living, right? How do you, if you believe that those have to be kind of reinvented generationally, how would you help solidify the understandings that you feel you've gained?
Wow, that was a long question. Man, I'd almost ask you to repeat that. The thing of it is, with permaculture, it's a lifestyle change. It's not just buying a tiny house and jumping in there and ditching all your paperwork. And, you know, it's to really practice and apply permaculture in your life. You embrace the ethics. I have a really hard time throwing something away until I have squeezed everything out of it. And of course I recycle, you know, and recycle is the bottom step. There's, you know, refuse, reduce, reuse, redesign, repurpose, rethink, repair. all these things, and then recycle comes last. But so I have a very hard time just even throwing anything away. But as I continue to apply permaculture in my life, you have to, if care for the people embraces everything, that's justice for everybody. We have to step into our own humanity and also step into our place in nature. We're not on top of nature. We are within nature. We are surrounded by nature, and it's actually a better life waiting for us if we can really embrace this. And, a lot of permaculture ethics and applications and wisdoms comes out of the indigenous world. And, the indigenous people, they weren't afraid in their environment. In an indigenous culture, no one went without food. Everyone had a house. In fact, the young people knew how to build a house when they were teenagers. I mean, they just grew up and lived in that sustainable, we have to take care of our mother and she will take care of us concept. And of course, the 7 generations is the base of permaculture as well. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. You see all this gray hair? You gave me too many words in that. And there's so many principles. I think it might be better to just ring them off, and then we'll see if we don't answer that. And
Okay.
these are principles that you use in design. Do you want me to go forward?
Yes, keep ringing them off.
Ringing them off. Integrate rather than segregate. And that's about connecting things together. This would really come into play with villages. The number of connections that you have in any design, in any community, is what gives us its strength, is all the different connections of bringing things together rather than separating everything out. And science kind of has done that. Science has taken everything down into the nth degree, smaller, ever smaller, breaking it apart in smaller pieces. And permaculture kind of says, let's put these back together and see what it looks like as a whole and how we can work with that. So integrate rather than segregate is one of the primary principles. Using small and slow solutions. We're so in a rush for everything. And permaculture would say start small. Small is beautiful. Big is subsidized. So you start small and you build on your successes. If you don't know how to garden, you don't go out and turn 40 acres and start to farm. You get a little pot in your backyard and you start to learn to garden there, or you join your neighbors. So you start at your doorstep and you build out from there. And that also keeps it on a human scale. Use and value diversity, which is the opposite of a monoculture. So, the tiny house movement, I love the diversity and just the looks of the tiny house and how you could see them in different areas, different communities. I live in a Victorian community. I imagine we'd have a lot of gabled roofs and little doorways and porches and such. So diversity is not just plants, not just people, but the more diverse your system is, the stronger it is in the same way as the integration. Because if one aspect falls out, you have all these other aspects to support it up. In nature, there's diversity in plant structure, roots, leaves, fruits, diversity of ages, there's genetics, all this stuff is the diversity that we value. Use edges and value the marginal. That's kind of this one is a little difficult to explain, but the edge is an intersection between two environments. I live in a community that's an edge between the conservative and the alternative. And a lot more can happen there. If you think of ecosystems where the prairie meets the forest, there's this edge where they overlap, the ecotones overlap. You might have 25 species on the prairie, 25 in the forest, but you might have 75 in this overlap zone because it's rich. Where water meets land, that's a real rich edge. So, one edge for tiny house would be the urban-suburban edge of, bringing the tiny houses into this as a smaller house in the midst of this sameness and start breaking that down a little bit. More can happen. You can generate more income. You can use a tiny house for an Airbnb. You can have extended family. Just think if you didn't have to fly to New York City to see your mom when she's not feeling well, as opposed to having her in your backyard, in your garden. Maybe she's your gardener. So all these things start to hatch out of this hash of overlap. Another edge is outside the suburban, in the rural, farms. People have left the country. the countryside to come to the city. So you could actually repopulate farms, and they're already doing this with tiny houses. You have 5 tiny houses, you have room for 5, 10, farm workers and a place for them to stay, a lovely place. So it's kind of tiny houses allowing us to step away from the industrial world that we live in. And speaking of that, even a tiny house within industrial regions, we all have them, that brings in comfort and all of the aspects of home into a very harsh environment. So that's kind of what edges are. There's a lot more to that. And then valuing the marginal would be, the marginal is like, in Colorado, you can go harvest mushrooms in the right season and it's a small harvest, but you value that. Nothing like that, and it's much better than what you would buy in the store, just like fishing. And some of these might seem marginal to people, or why do you even bother? Well, that's because we value that, and we value it beyond the product. It's the whole experience and the self-enhancing aspect of the process. Tiny houses are considered marginal right now in my culture. I mean, they're having a hard time figuring out how we can get them in, and I value the marginal. So I really think tiny houses are doing what you can't do in a mainstream house. So creatively use and respond to change is the last of the 12 principles. I think I've covered them all pretty much. And that's what we're doing today. We are responding to change. Why are tiny houses so popular? Why is permaculture such a buzzword? It's because we desperately need to change how we're living. And we can't have change without making changes. And so this is giving people avenues to make changes and design their own life, design their own way of living. And it's not like you're doing it without money. I mean, I'm not opposed to working. I'm just kind of opposed to being trapped in Nowheresville. Does that make sense? I mean, so that we can design our own life. Permaculture can do that. I don't know if you guys know about peak oil at all. You can Google peak oil. It's an aspect of the fossil fuel and extraction industry. We are not going to have these materials forever, of which we run everything in our lives on. And to break away as much as you can out of the fossil fuel usage. My humble little house here in Manitou, we have solar panels. We have a passive, I'd say greenhouse, but it's more of a sunroom, but it is passive on the backside of our house. We have a wood stove. We have chickens. We have a food forest of native plants. So these are all things that I'm bringing in to kind of push myself away from dependence on extraction industry, fossil fuels. I do have a computer. I try not to have top level. Poor Steve had to go through a bunch of hoops to just get me here today. But so anyway, with permaculture, we can design our way out of the future. And I think a vast majority of us will be wanting to live in a tiny house. You lose nature when you step inside these big McMansions and such. You lose nature. I think tiny houses will reintroduce us back to nature just by being so small. And it's like, hey, it's a nice day, I'm going outside. I think that's so powerful. And I'm so grateful. I just think it's exciting. I can see my kids living in a tiny house.
This is really good material. Okay. So in the tiny house world, there are often legal barriers to living small. I'm assuming there are comparably interesting barriers for permaculture?
Well, maybe not. Tiny houses have their own challenge because of zoning laws. I mean, I practice permaculture, and the code enforcement guy can go, your yard doesn't look like everybody else's. And I can go, I didn't realize that was a rule that my house had to look like everybody else's. But so there's resistance to things like, composting toilets, the ick factor. My mother, 89, bless her heart, she will never use a composting toilet. But my granddaughter, I could see that's the only way she's going to use a toilet, because at some point we're going to realize we can't keep wasting the water. So permaculture is long vision. I think tiny house is long vision too. Let's see, what other challenges that I run into? I really don't see as many challenges, because most people who are a good portion of them are just stepping into the food aspect and growing food, and that door's been kicked wide open. Now, I would say the next step would be growing our own medicine and unhooking from big pharma. I think that would be really powerful, and I think we could do that. And in fact, that is already happening. You know,
I guess I'm reading too many stories about people who were doing permaculture-like food in their yards and were told that it didn't look good enough or it wasn't allowed.
well, there's a whole HOA issue, and I actually tell my own council, it's like, you know what, I'm not being an HOA for the community. That's not our role, to make sure people paint their houses. Criminy. So there might be some of that, and I've actually taken issue with that, of like, you know, your things in your yard can only be 8 inches tall, and I'm going, that's ridiculous. Go look at the hillside. There's plenty of diversity of sizes. And so we have to break out of this devotion to bluegrass and devotion to sameness and blandness. I have a yard, you know, I have a certified backyard habitat with the National Wildlife Federation, and people either love my yard or they hate my yard. But I have not been hassled. I know other people have been hassled. That's an education problem. That's also a lack of support. And this is the activist in me. If someone is getting hassled, you got to support that person if they're doing the right thing. You know, it's, if 25 people showed up to that one person who's being hassled for growing food and said, I want to grow food too, I want to grow food too, this is not right. Let me tell you, the politicians will be going, especially the ones that want to get reelected, would be going, ooh, you know, maybe we should rethink this. We just had an issue like that locally here with a whistleblower getting threatened with suit by the local utilities, and enough people stood up and said, what the hell are you doing? She's speaking for us, and we have to pay for the darn lawyers because you're our utilities. And they just today, they vacated the order and they're going to let her go, which is awesome. But if people hadn't stepped up, that wouldn't have happened. So the time where we can just like relax and just not work actively on this human community that we live in, that's past. I don't know if that ever existed. But right now, people need to wake up and actually stand up and speak out for their community and for what is right in their community, and about what is wrong in their community. Being an activist doesn't always make you popular, but you know, you can't do it for popularity. You have to do it for the future generations that are going to come here. Because if you look at any of the climate change things, it's sketchy. It's sketchy at best. We need to get good at this now so that they can improve on it, not wait until the last minute and then maybe something different will happen. I just don't believe that. I think we have to stand up and be heard now for all these things.
I guess the other one I was thinking of are the prohibitions on rainwater collection.
That's legal in most states. And in Colorado, they just legalized 2 rain barrels. And a lot of the earthworks are legal. And I would say, okay, this is not my not the councilwoman. I would say just because something's illegal doesn't mean you can't do it. It's illegal because somebody thinks it's bad.
Now you're taking us back to Thoreau.
Okay, I love David Thoreau. Henry David, bless his heart. I hope he's reincarnated several times. So, you know, I tell people when I do rainwater harvesting classes, and it's like, you know, so they say you can have 2. I say get 20. 2 rain barrels in my region is 1 day's worth of water for the average person, you know. So rainwater harvesting is something that it's an education. They don't really understand it. The science, the laws don't follow the science, especially in Colorado. In Colorado, you know, we have headwaters for a good portion of the water in our country. So other states have ownership on some of this water. But the concept is if we harvest water into the soil, that we're taking that water away. And the concept that reading their stuff is that every drop of rain goes to the creek. Well, if that were true, Steve, the creeks would all be dry right now. And they're not. They're obviously not. At least they're not in my neck of the woods. The creeks are flowing. Why are they flowing? That's groundwater. Our cultural pattern is you treat water like a pollution source. You get it off the roof, out into the yard, or even better, out into the street so it can go down the street, cause stormwater fees, pollution, all this stuff. That is backwards. That is depleting the soil of its water recharge. If we were able to take that water and put it into the soil we would not only be preserving the flow of the rivers, we would be increasing the ability of our trees and other plants to survive. And in Manitou, we have mineral springs. It would be an insurance on aquifers. And so, you know, that it's an education thing. Education, and that's why, you know, Pikes Peak Permaculture is all about education and just getting that out there. And, you know, so read some books, take a course, build your own tiny house. You will learn so much from doing that. You know, learn by doing. Who knew? And you enjoy it, and it becomes a part of you, and you have much more ownership and depth of understanding when you do that. And so I know those things are out there. Those are just challenges. And if, you know, we go back to speaking your truth and standing out and getting people to stand with you, then, you know, we can wrestle these things. And otherwise, just move far out and just, you know, don't ask, don't tell. Just, you know, hide those things.
I think we finished there. Thank you, Becky, for braving the technology and for sharing.
Well, yeah, I am kind of an idiot. Let me this last little thing I have down here, and it's very hard to do this because I don't think I looked at any of my notes. But I did want to say this. This is just a little wrap up. It's like everything we do in nature has repercussions and reports through time. Everything we do is moving out. Tiny houses will continue to spread out and make changes, deep, meaningful changes in people's lives as people discover them. Environmental concerns are where permaculture and tiny houses fit so well. Tiny house and the cross-pollinations that it's bringing into all of the different directions that it's going, the water, the waste, the energy. It's going to help the movement move forward. And let's just build it and keep going for the greater good of everyone. We have a future coming. You may be there, I may not, but I'm doing what I can now for the benefit of all and for the benefit of the 7 generations.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
Elder. Thanks, everybody.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the 2017 Tiny House Summit. Take care.
See you at the Jamboree, hey?